Ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for tuning in to another episode of Generational Wrestling Podcast. As always, as you are truly the 28-year-old piece of gold, the franchise, aka the showstopper, better known as the GOW's resident tribal chief. And with me, as always, I got my tag team partner, my brother, my family. He is the flyest in the room, Mr. 1, 2, 3. Pin that ass down, K Breezy, aka EC's resident Isaac Hayes King Tuco. What's going on, bro?
Man, what's going on with the people, man? Welcome to Evil Thursdays, ladies and gentlemen, man. As we're gonna sit back and we're gonna give you our point of view on each episode for moving forward for the next what is it, 6 episodes, 8 episodes, however many episodes. That's how many we gonna do for the next 8 weeks. Then you got us doing this for the next 8 weeks, and this week we are starting off with the infamous one himself, man. Of course, the one that I remember so fondly when it happened. I remember watching the match. Bash at the Beach. I remember watching that Nitro, bro. Hollywood Hulk Hogan, man.
Yeah.
Bet I can't wait till we get into this, boy. I can't wait till we get into this one. Let's go.
Well, as you see, man, I'm back to the old school Mike. When we first started this thing,
Hey,
I
for
figured,
sure.
I figure if we're gonna talk old school, Hulk Hogan and Hollywood Hogan and old school wrestling, man, I got
Hey,
to bring out the old school Mike. So yeah, man, let's talk about it. So Hulk Hogan, bro, throughout the 1980s, Mr. Americana himself, you know what I'm saying? Say your prayers, eat your vitamins, down in the red and yellow. Everybody know, man, red and yellow, you can't go wrong with it. McDonald's has proven that time after time, year after year that red and yellow is timeless, man. People love them
hey,
some red and yellow. But bro, towards the end of the 80s, Hulk Hogan, he started to feel a shift and people's reactions toward him, right? Hulk Hogan
hmm
realized, that as we started to move less out of character-based wrestling, we started kind of getting into the 90s, man, where wrestling kind of turned and it became more reality-based. People started using more of their real names. You didn't have as much of a gimmick, quote unquote, per se. It wasn't as over the top in the fantasy sense. It was more
yeah,
based off of real life situations and personalities. And then you got Hulk Hogan. He left for a while. He tried his hand in Hollywood. He tried his hand in the movie thing. Didn't really work out too well for him. And then he came back, bro. He came back, but this time it wasn't with WWE. It was in WCW, and America's most beloved figure in the history of pro wrestling. I'm not gonna say just America, man, just in wrestling in general. Came back and he
yeah.
joined the NWO, which we didn't know at the time until it happened. And then he unveiled, man, this Hollywood Hulk Hogan persona, man. Something that was so drastically, so vastly different from, the quintessential good guy that we've gotten so used to over the years. And he hit that switch and he became the complete polar opposite. Man, literally the definition of arrogance and evil. Too cold,
Mm,
man. The 90s,
mm.
we get Hollywood Hulk Hogan. And bro, let's talk about it, man. For the next 10 years, he would go on, man, and try to, help WCW put WWE out of business. But before we get to that point, man, we got a long way and a lot to talk about, bro. You, man, let's get into it. As somebody who actively watched the product during this time, because me, 93 was, I know was the year I was born, 28, about to be 29 years ago. So, I caught WCW right in the middle of the war, by this point where I can really remember 99, 2000, hell 98. We were already years in it, right? And we were coming up to
Yeah.
that tail end of it. Bro, for you, as somebody who's seen Hulk Hogan in his prime as the good guy, and then he made that transition to the most hated villain. You got people throwing trash in the ring. You got death threats. You have all kind of craziness going on because at the end of the day, especially back in this time period, it's real to them. Talk to the people what that meant for fans back in the day, such as yourself, where when you see him lose the black and the white, the red and yellow, and go to the black and white, man, he came out with the black beard, with the gold, and he just looks so badass, man. What did that mean for you?
Everything, good and bad. And Fro, what's going on, Fro?
What up, bro?
Uh, man, it meant everything because as a kid, he was, again, like they said, he was the ultimate good guy.
Yeah.
You know, he was the, I mean, dude, I've ripped many of shirts doing the Hulk Hogan, dude. So my mama was mad at me for that. Enough in itself. But uh that's what Hulk Hogan was, man. You say your prayers, you eat your vitamins, and you show your 24-inch pythons, and you just, man, you're just Hulk Hogan, man. Everything that he stood for, all that goodness,
Right, right,
and
right.
it did get to a tipping point where it was just the same thing over and over, and it really was, and it just to think that. Somehow John Cena was able to surpass that.
Yeah.
You think about that. You think about that now. You think about how John Cena was able to be the good, even though he already had his bad guy run, but he wasn't the John Cena of what he became when he had a
Yeah.
bad run.
Yeah.
For Hogan, where Hogan came in always kind of just that good guy, and then he became the All American hero.
Right, right.
Cena had a run of just being the good guy all the time. And we saw
Hmm.
where that took wrestling.
Yeah.
And it was the same thing for Hogan, but just not as long because, like you say, by 93, 94, the whole thing with Vince and the whole steroid trial that was going on,
Hmm.
and you know the issues he was having, and him trying to, get Trouble in Paradise for what it was worth,
Right.
trying to get that off, and all the movies he was in. There was that stagnant of Hogan because it was just the same Hogan. And to quote one famous bad guy, it was time for people to say hello to the bad guy,
Yeah.
and it was something different. But but it didn't just start in wrestling. It started in movies because you had
Hmm.
movies and other stuff and TV shows where the bad guy was cool and you just wanted and you kind of liked the bad guy, and
Yeah.
you've always liked the bad. I've always felt people always liked the bad guy. You always wanted to see the bad guy kind of triumph. I mean, the bad guy always had to triumph. So
Right.
to have a guy like Hulk Hogan, who and I also want to point out that I'm glad it wasn't Sting for the mere fact that it wouldn't have had the same impact.
Yeah. Yeah.
That impact of Sting changing, it would have been devastating wrestling wise, but it wouldn't have been devastating worldwide.
Yeah.
Hogan
Yeah.
turning made it devastating worldwide.
Yeah.
Everybody felt some type of way. Like everybody was pissed. Nobody, the trash that they threw in the ring, man. The
Right.
it was just watching it happen. Like I'm not gonna lie. Like okay, of course I'm a wrestling fan. I'm what is this? This is 93, 94. So I'm 13, 14. So I'm at that point where I like the Scott Hall and the Kevin Nash thing. Like I like that they're the bad guys. I'm booing them, but I like that they're the bad guys. They're doing
Right.
something different. It's like I know who they are. I know how good they are, but it's like, oh man, what they're doing. And then to have everything that they were doing, just building this whole thing up. And like they say, it wasn't even, and to really now hear the fact that they're really, the plan was for Hogan, but if he was sold on not doing it so much because he didn't think it would work,
Right.
that they really had nobody, even though it was Sting as the backup. But again, Sting wouldn't have had that same impact. So
Yeah.
to have Hogan come down, and it's like to see him come down, it's like, oh shit, it's about to go down. Hogan about to wreck shop, NWO about to get their butts whooped.
Right.
But then, like they say, you're listening to Bobby Heenan. We're at home. We're not in the crowd there, so we're listening to Bobby Heenan. I hear what Bobby Heenan is saying. Like, who
Right.
is he? Which side is he on? But I'm thinking like that's just Bobby Heenan being Bobby Heenan. I didn't pay attention to it, but I heard it to where it's like Bobby just talking crap because that's just Bobby. That's what he do.
Right. Right.
To see Hogan lay that first leg drop,
Talk to him.
that that's when the reality hit. Like
Hmm.
and it did, and like they said, it did because it was like wait, whoa, wait a minute. Wait a minute. He just wait, and then by the time you realize what he did, he's laying another leg drop. So it's
Yeah.
like, yo, like your brain is not processing. You're still not processing this fast enough that
Right.
yo, Hulk Hogan just turned heel. Oh shit, Hulk Hogan just turned
Just
heel.
turn heel. Right,
Oh
right,
shit,
right.
Hulk Hogan just turned heel. Like, dude, like what am I like? Wait a minute, what is this? Like, what is going on? Like, is this what's like that lost for words? Like, you
Yeah.
really like if you followed it, man, bruh, like you were really lost for words. And just watching everything go on, and then of course they get the pivotal pin. Scott Hall counts to 1, 2, 3. You know, the match has been laid over or whatever. People are throwing stuff in the trash. They cut the promo and all that. You know, they talk about, man, and it's just like, what just happened? What did I just watch? What Hulk Hogan just turned heel. He just told me to go screw myself. Hulk Hogan just, yo, hey man, Hulk Hogan just turned heel. Like, and so, and then like Shawn Michaels said, the little small detail of Hulk Hogan that just made it, the black beard. When the blackness of the beard, I ain't gonna lie, man. That just, and then like you said, when he airbrushed his boots and all that,
Yeah.
that just gave it the evil vibe that it needed. Everything that you saw in that series and what they were saying that he was saying, it was true because that's exactly what it was. And Hulk Hogan was reinvented. Hulk Hogan was back. I mean, at Hollywood, Hulk Hogan was at the same peak of Hulkamania.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
and some people may say,
Yeah.
nah, no, Hollywood Hogan. If it was at that same peak, the way that Hollywood Hogan took over the entertainment world and brought the attention to wrestling, Hollywood Hogan did the same thing
Mm-hmm.
because it brought the entertainment world, it brought everybody because nobody could believe the one dude that's been walking around the face of this earth for the last 20 some years as this say your prayers, eat your vitamins, and be the good guy and all that. He was telling people to go screw yourselves. He was cheating. He was doing every dirty dastard thing that he could do, and people were hating it until people started loving it, and then that's when it went to a whole nother level.
Yeah, and, you know that's the thing. That's the one thing you notice with all bad guys who are good at their role. Uh, Even if you absolutely start off hating it in the beginning, right? There's this switch, and eventually something clicks in your brain where if you're a bad guy and you're good at being a bad guy, there's something undeniable about that. Because if you respect the sport,
But
if you
nobody
respect
knew
the
that of Hogan. No one expected Hogan to be good as the bad guy, but he's so
but
charismatic.
that's the thing. But that's exactly the thing. That's why people hated it, because you didn't know him as that, right? He was always presented as one thing, and what's that? What I'm saying, say your prayers, eat your vitamins.
Eat your vitamins.
Hulk, the good guy, right? Hulk Hogan was the American hero. Hulk Hogan was that guy
Yeah,
waving the flag,
yeah,
and then for you to
yeah.
pretty much come out and like, hey, yo, like you say, hey, screw all y'all, stick it, shove it, do whatever you got to do. And so when Hulk Hogan, when he donned the black and white, I feel like, Hulk Hogan as a good guy, even though he had so much character and charisma and he was over the top, I feel like with him being a heel when he joined the NWO, I feel like
Right.
that's really where you saw, the swag of Hulk Hogan. That's where he really
Yeah.
turned it up, because now I feel like Hulk Hogan, he kind of could pull the curtain back a little bit. I feel like he was able to be more of himself, just turned up 1,000, right? I feel like this is what Hulk Hogan, if he can get away with being an asshole, this is exactly who Hulk Hogan would be. He came out, even just the cockiness of it, man. Like when he came out in the whole air guitar, and he
To
changed up.
Jimi Hendrix. That was the whole
Yeah,
thing. He was
yeah,
coming.
yeah. And like I say, like he just had a whole new swag. And then when you look at the tights, you go from the red and yellow trunks to now he got the long tights. Now he got the
Bro.
airbrush boots, and then it's okay. Let's get into it. Let's get into the meat and potatoes of it. Okay, so how did we get here, right? So Hulk Hogan, he's thinking about going to WCW. Eric Bischoff, he said, Hogan said, "Hey, look, dude, I really don't know you, and the few people I know here at WCW, I don't trust them.
I don't trust them either.
And the only way I will come here is if I get creative control." Now, you got to give it to him. You got to give it to him because at this point, you're going up against WWE. You killing them in the ratings at this point, but you have their biggest asset and probably the biggest acquisition in the history of professional wrestling, Hulk Hogan. You're not going to let that go. Okay, so then we get Hulk Hogan, and then we get the aftermath of that because shortly after that, Turner, the Turner execs, they end up snatching WCW from Eric Bischoff. They end up putting in Vince Russo. Vince Russo, according to Hulk Hogan, said, "Hey, look, anybody over the age of 40, we getting rid of you." But Hulk Hogan is ironclad. He got creative control. Then comes the situation, man, the infamous match with Jeff Jarrett, right? Russo wanted to get the title up off of Hogan, give it to Jarrett. Hogan went down with it. Jeff Jarrett lays down in the ring, no contact made. 1, 2, 3. You could tell Hulk Hogan visibly pissed. Now you got Hogan and you got Russo shooting on each other live. And the thing about Hogan, right? He tried to make it seem in his documentary, his Evil episode, that yes, it's just business. But then when you look at what happened with Hogan and Bischoff and TNA, do you think Hulk Hogan and his creative control single-handedly was the factor in bringing the demise of WCW? When you look at TNA now and how TNA was on the uptick, TNA literally was at one point neck and neck to a degree when it came to competing with WWE. Then it's like when Hogan came in, they changed the ring and they started doing subtle shit, man. It was like WCW all over again. And to me, even though TNA is making strides to come back, they've never recovered from that momentum they had from 2002 to 08, 09?
09, something like that, yeah.
So do you think, man, we can blame Hogan, as great as his heel turn was, the politics that came with it? Do you think that played a role in WCW ultimately collapsing?
Well, yes. I do, but I also don't feel it's just Hogan. Kevin Nash said it best. If they had a script for something and then he comes in and he doesn't want to do it, but he doesn't have any idea of what they want to do. I mean, but even he said it. So it's like it wasn't just Kevin Nash. He had creative control, but he might have been willing to see other guys come up because he knew you need to see other guys come up. I mean, Vince Russo wasn't wrong about that. Like he was not wrong about that, man. It got to the point where, okay, the initial years of the first what is this? So this is about 94 on episode 94 through 97 was the highlight of Hogan. All right, and when I mean highlight, meaning that was the tip of that Hollywood Hogan before it started getting to the point where he didn't seem like he was willing to put people over. Goldberg was an exception. Sting was an exception. Sting was more than an exception because he was an original WCW dude. He was one of them guys that had always been there, and he wasn't gonna take being shoved to the shit because of Hogan don't want to fuck bump that. Right. You can't win all the time. And Hogan dominated, all right, and he won, he cheated, and it made sense for the character when he first became the character. That first year where he went through, I believe it was like Piper, and it was the Macho Man, and then it was the Ultimate Warrior, and then it was the Big Show, or at that time it was the Giant. He was going through people, and he was cheating to win, and and people was more and more joining him. Now, after it got past Sting, when it got to Sting and Sting beat him, and then then Goldberg ended up beating him, and then when it got to that point, it was, you thought it was on we're getting some new people. We got Goldberg, Sting's in the mix. You got DDP, you got Lex Luger. You had guys that other guys that can come in and beat Hogan and win the title. But then we were also watching the Chris Jerichos. We were watching the Eddie
Mhm.
Guerreros. We were watching the Harlem Heats. We were
Dean
watching a lot of the
Malenko's.
Steiner brothers, the Dean Malenkos.
Yeah.
We were watching a lot of these other guys that we were liking and that were really good, and we wanted to see
Right.
them come up too. But the NWO at some point got bigger than his britches.
Mm.
I feel like that's partly on Bischoff and Hogan, where there should have been a set number to the NWO,
Yeah,
and
because at
there
one
was
point
no
you
set
had
number.
half the goddamn roster in the NWO.
And then because that got too big, so then you had factions where you had the NWO of Wolfpack, and then you had an NWO Black and White, and then you had
Yeah.
that Latino World Order, then you had the Blue, and you had just all these new world orders. But there should have been a set number on members in the new world order. I think
Yeah.
8 would have been enough. 7, 6 to 8, 8, 6 at the max. Minimum 6. You give me a minimum 6. You got the big 3. You could have added 3 more. It ain't
Right.
like you really needed a whole bunch of people. You just needed enough to where if you wanted to kind of gang style beat up on people, you had enough people to do something, and you had enough people to fight back. You
Yeah.
needed people to fight back, and that was the thing. And like every time somebody fought back, they would quickly turn on that person that they were helping, and now they didn't join the NWO. Like that was the problem. Everybody kept joining the NWO, and but when it got to the point where okay, you had the dysfunction between Kevin Nash and Hogan and Scott Hall, I actually thought that was good because at some point it's like, all right, y'all rode this thing together, but at some point, one of y'all got to get tired of seeing Hogan win all the time. One of y'all
Right.
got to
Right.
want to win the championship. So and everybody thought that was Scott Hall. So when we saw Scott Hall going for the championship and he was taking the Wolfpack side of it and Hogan was keeping the black and white, that was actually kind of cool. You still didn't need to overdo it with the amount of people you had, but
Yeah.
you had that friction, and then you still had everyone else that you were coming up with. But by this time, you really weren't doing much with them. So some of them were already out the door. Chris Jericho and a few others at the Radicals as they went the following year. But if I have to blame, I just don't blame Hogan. I don't just blame Vince Russo. He was right. You had guys that were mid card long enough,
Yeah.
and some of them needed to move up. And I believe Hogan wasn't willing to move up on some of these guys. And that was a bit of a problem because of that's creative control.
Yeah.
Because he's trying to maximize. And I understand where he's looking at it from, dude. This is it for me. No one knew what was going to happen when in 2002 when he fought The Rock. No one knew what was going to happen after that. No one thought that Hogan would get a third life. Okay, we weren't really sure about it, but not to the extent of what it became. But
Hmm.
understanding what had previous happened, I understand the approach that he took. And also, like you said, he didn't know Bischoff and he didn't trust none of them other people. So he wasn't going to let people dick him over. Respect that. You got to get yours. You always got to get yours. But you got to make sure everyone else is in the right place too. And I feel like those were the issues. Bischoff, he let it get too out of control, but Hogan had the right to let it get out of control. But Hogan was also at fault for letting it get in control. And Vince Russo probably could have did some things different, but it is what it is.
All right. Well, let's talk about Hogan and his third life. So in March 26, 2001, WCW is bought by WWE. A year later, Hulk Hogan still dying in the black and white. He comes in, man, a year later at WrestleMania 2002. March 17th in the Sky Dome is Hogan versus Rock. You got the symbolic passing of the torch. But Too Cold, man, this is one of the greatest moments in wrestling history. So you got Hollywood Hulk Hogan, man, who was supposed to be the heel. You got The Rock, who is supposed to be, the young upcoming baby face, super over. And
Yeah.
then the crowd, man, the crowd made it known who they wanted and what role. So, it became very apparent early in the match, like, all right, man, we got to call it audible. The more offense The Rock got, the more boos he got. The more offense, Hogan laid down on The Rock, the more cheers he got. In mid-match, man, we get the infamous double turn, in which now Hogan is the good guy, Rocky by default is the bad guy. But after this match, man, the entire arena went nuts. They show love, they show respect for both. Too Cold, man, you got two of the greatest to ever do it. And then this would eventually lead Vince to wanting Hulk Hogan to go back to the red and yellow. However, we seen a different Hulk Hogan. It wasn't the Save Prayers, Eat Your Vitamins Hulk Hogan. You had the look of that Hulk Hogan, but you still had certain characteristics of Hollywood Hogan, man. So you kind of got the best of both worlds. Too Cold, man. I want to take it one step at a time. Hogan, Rock, WrestleMania 2002 Skydome, the atmosphere off the charts, and this is when right before Rocky was really, really getting his foot into Hollywood as well himself. What do you remember about the double turn, and then of course Hogan coming back for his final run?
Well, before we go to WrestleMania, we got to go back to the Raw a couple of weeks before that, where, you can go back to when the NWO actually showed up at No Way Out, the pay-per-view that was symbolically named No Way Out, but also could represent the New World Order, where they showed up and they introduced themselves to a few people, but no one can ever forget the Monday Night Raw, where The Rock and Hulk Hogan stood toe to toe in the ring. You can never not talk about that, because that set the stage for everything that came towards that WrestleMania. There was a reason, but also but what I liked about it is that no matter what we feel Hogan or whoever was responsible for what happened in WCW, you still respected the character of who he was.
Yeah.
And honestly, because things had gotten so real, because we got to think about it. Also, the one thing about the later years of WCW before it got out, you were really behind the fourth wall.
Mm-hmm.
So you weren't just seeing scripted conversations. You were seeing real arguments. You were seeing real people giving you real shit. Like, you were seeing a lot of that. So I think by the time he comes back, a lot of people either respected it or liked it, or people probably understood it, but still felt the way they, he could have dropped the title to one or two people, but Hollywood Hogan was still badass though, man. Like, that was just still like, he had that respect, but he also still had the respect of being Hulkamania. Like, no one never forgets that he's Hulkamania. So they held on to that. And those, by the time they've gotten older, they've taken in the Hollywood stature. So by the time we get to this Raw and he shows up and they have that epic one-on-one in the ring, and they accept the challenge, and the crowd is just giving it to him, man. They are just giving it to him, and they are eating it up. And then of course you got the beat down that happened to The Rock, to kind of still give that NWO Hogan vibe leading into the WrestleMania. So by the time we get to Toronto, which obviously these people were Hulk Hogan fans. They wanted to see Hulk Hogan. And maybe people were tired of seeing the Hollywood Hogan, but wanted to see, and they just wanted to get that, just wanted to see Hulk Hogan. And you were seeing Hulk Hogan, one of the greatest of all times, that you can never dispute, regardless of how you felt about his in-ring work or whatever. Hulk Hogan is one of the greatest of all times, and he was going up against The Rock, the most electrifying man in sports entertainment and WWE. If it was Austin, it would have been the same electricity. If it does, so I don't even think it really matters. I think it was better for The Rock, because The Rock is just more charismatic, and just the way he talks his shit back. He could talk shit back real good. The Rock can get you on 20-minute promo and a good match, but even if you don't wrestle, The Rock gonna give you a good 20 minutes or something, and you're gonna enjoy it. So that was perfect. The match was it went beautifully. I thought it went the way the way it was supposed to go. You were supposed to get people back in, in that nostalgia of Hulk Hogan, and just that that lore of just seeing him. And then once he was doing, I mean, but you got to think about it. Hulk Hogan never stopped doing the Hulk up. Even as
Yeah,
Hollywood Hogan, he
yeah,
never stopped doing it, but we hadn't seen him in WWE in so long. And I think
yeah,
that's what helped bring
yeah,
on the Hulkamania. That's what helped bring that back because at this point, I think it was obvious that the NWO wasn't going to be what we thought they were going to be in WWE. I think a lot of people
yeah,
recognized that early on, but because this was the best that we were going to get it, they took it for what it was, and they put that boy right back in the red and yellow. And when he came back in the red yellow, what did he do? He beat Triple H and became an undisputed champion. So it's like, damn,
yeah,
okay, all right. And then he lost to the Undertaker again. And he had another run for another 4 to 5 years. But this isn't about the good guy, the bad guy becoming good. This is about the bad guy, and the bad guy was one of the almost all. It was the greatest heel turn ever.
yeah,
Hulk Hogan, like I say, the guy that you would never, the last person you would ever think to come down and do something wrong to somebody was Hulk Hogan, and for him to do it again, it was awesome. But uh, man, I John Cena could have hit like John Cena had lightning in the bottle.
yeah,
Roman Reigns took advantage of that, but the problem with Roman Reigns, he was never beloved. So it was people were more satisfied with him turning heel than they
right,
were with him being face. But if John Cena was to ever turn heel at the height of his career, like if
yeah,
he did a good 5 years,
yeah,
as the Super Cena and all that, and then at some point he had turned heel, man, that would have you can't tell me Vince and them would have been worried about merchandise sales because they would have went up. You know why? Because the 18 to 49 would have had your back, baby.
yeah,
Because we would have supported that, and we would have put money in your pockets because people would have wanted to see that John Cena. And Vince, if that change did so much, and WCW did well with that. They
yeah,
made money. They
yeah.
made loot.
I mean, people
Imagine
still
what it
to this
would.
day buying NWO shirts. Come
It's
on now.
still to this day, they buying that merch. Still to this day, they are still being advertised. To do that with John Cena
Yeah,
now,
that would have been a
that would
game
have been
changer.
that
Because
would
think
have been
about
a
it.
game
Think about it.
changer.
If he's the
But he
top
didn't want to
merch,
turn heel.
if he's the
And it
top
hurt the
merch
kid's
seller,
feelings.
if he's the top merch seller of all time, along, I think he's either right above, right below Steve Austin. But if he's the top merch seller now as a face, and people hated, hated, hated the face thing. Imagine if he turned heel because okay, I understand the Doctor Thugon as much as we like the Doctor Thugonomics. Let's be honest, it ran its course, but
Yeah, he
I'm
didn't need to be that.
no
He
no no
would
no.
not have needed to be that.
But but,
No,
that, but
no,
that's
no,
but
no.
that's what I'm saying. It ran its course, but you seen how good he could be as a heel. Okay, now granted, he needed his face run. He did. I understand because at this point you were building the company around Cena. Cena essentially became your Babe Ruth, your Lou Gehrig, your Hulk Hogan, if you will, of this era. So I get that. But then, much like Hulk Hogan, you seen it because you can't tell me that Cena couldn't have had a great recovery. Imagine, like you say, five,
Oh
six
yeah.
years.
Oh
Imagine
yeah.
5, 6 years of Super Cena. Hell, he ain't even had to do it for a long time. Give it a good 2, 3 year, heel turn,
Nah,
and then a man, and then
nah,
a man.
no, 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 no. Because in order for him to be considered that Hogan light, it needed to happen for a certain amount of years. So it needed a certain amount of length. That's why I say that 5 to 6 year run where he won the championship and he was just Super Cena. That put him in that category because after that 5 to 6 year run, that's when people started feeling like, all right, man, damn, can
Okay,
anybody else win the championship?
but look,
So after that, if you'd have turned him heel for a year or two, or and then you could have built him back as it's John Cena.
well,
You come on, man. Feels you could have did something.
hey, look, I got a scenario for you. Okay, so you let him have that 5 to 6 years, and then you imagine if you got heel John Cena, doing all this shit, and then you got The Rock coming back. That matches are that first one already has so much electricity. So much electricity. So what if you use The Rock? Because essentially they used The Rock and John Cena, just like they did with Hogan and The Rock. The Rock came back. It was a passing of the torch right before Cena went to Hollywood. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
imagine you got a heel John Cena at the prime, at the height, and now you got The Rock coming back as a Hulk Hogan
That
thing. And then
that
you
would have been
boom,
awesome. That
double
would have been
switch all
That
over
would have been
again.
Rock Hogan too, because
Double
now
switch all over again. And then Cena, that final run as a babyface, people wouldn't have mind Super Cena because you know what? They ain't seen it in so long. They clamoring for that shit.
You're moving too fast. Moving too fast. Bring it back some, bro. If it's heel Cena talking shit to The Rock, yo, there's your money. There's your entertainment. There's everything. That's you bringing back an audience, because now it's like, all right, we already know what this is kind of like because we watched it with Hogan and Rock. But now we're watching it with two guys. Cena is much more advanced with his words than Hogan is, and it's just with the times and everything else. So everything that Cena said, it could have had more venom to it. So by the time you have the first WrestleMania match, Cena loses. That humbles Cena. Cena takes some time off. Cena goes away for a little while, not too long. He don't go away too long. He just goes away for a little, maybe a month or so, if he stays away that long. But you build it up for Rock to beat him, humble his ass. Because Cena's talking shit. Cena's talking, he's talking all that trash that he's talked, but he's heel Cena. So now you got the heel Cena talking that trash. You got The Rock back. Then you got something. Then you could have used Cena when he returns, he's on a redemption to get back to being that dude. So when he beat The Rock, he won the championship. Then he had the run that he run. Then he could be back to being the good Cena. You could have however you could have did that, but the effect of what it did for Hogan is reason why I think a lot of people are like, man, like, come on, Vince. Like, this is what we want, Vince. Vince, this is what we want. Vince, come on, this is what we want, Vince. Vince, we'll come back, Vince. If you give us this and we'll come back. Come on, Vince, give it to us. Look, you need to do something different. And they still would have justified all his title runs, because then he just would have been heel Cena cheating and stealing the win to get the championship. So you still could have had that. It doesn't take nothing away from his title reign. It's just a difference in how he acted for a couple of years. But Hulk Hogan, man, greatest heel turn ever, man. And for it to be so surprising, like I say, to not have the internet of now back then. The secrecy can be the secrecy of it was so well kept, and so that way the shock and the surprise was everything that you wanted it to be.
Well, too cold, man. With that being said, that wraps up episode 1 of our WWE Evil Thursdays. Like I said, we went over the heel turn of Hollywood Hulk Hogan. Bro, next Thursday, we got episode 2. Which we will be talking about The Miz and his career, fellow Cleveland boy. So yeah, man, we got that coming up. But tomorrow, as always, man, we got 2 shows for you. Friday night, we got AEW Rampage, but before that, we got our Friday night SmackDown review. So we got 2 reviews coming to you live and direct. So be sure to check in with that. If you haven't already, man, subscribe to the YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, and Twitter. Do that 1, 2 for us, man. Hit that bell for all the notifications. Click that subscribe button. Be sure to like and comment on the video to help us out in the algorithm as well. Also, make sure you check us out anywhere you can, audio wise, as far as podcasts go, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts,
Anchor,
all that good shit. Anchor, the 1, 2. But we ain't gonna hold y'all up any longer. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for tuning in to another episode of Generational Wrestling Podcast. I'm the 28-year-old piece of gold. He's too cold, and we'll see y'all when we see you. Peace.